Commander Samuel Dealey, captain of the USS Harder, spotted 3 Japanese destroyers pursuing his submarine near Tawi-Tawi. Standard doctrine said to dive into deep water and hide, but Dealey did the unthinkable. He ordered full speed directly toward the destroyers. Every training manual said this was suicide, and submarine commanders throughout the Pacific said the action would be insane. But they were all wrong, because Dealey was about to prove that sometimes the best strategy isn't in the warbooks, it's in understanding the enemy's mind. The Japanese captains expected submarines to flee, but that's not what happened. Before I tell you how this bold maneuver changed the course of the battle, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave your like so we can hit the goal of 1,000 likes on this video, and comment where you're watching from and if you or someone in your family has served in the armed forces. Now yes, let's get to what really matters. June 6, 1944, 4:47 in the morning. The waters of the Sulu Sea tremble beneath the keel of the USS Harder, as Commander Samuel David Dealey presses the periscope against his face with enough force to leave marks on his skin. The lens reveals 3 black silhouettes cutting the horizon like guillotine blades, Japanese Fubuki-class destroyers, each armed with 127mm guns and enough depth charges to transform his submarine into a steel tomb at 300 feet deep. Sweat runs down Dealey's temple, not from fear, but from the infernal temperature inside the submarine. 83 men breathe the same thin air, recycled by filters that smell of diesel oil and hope. The sonar operator, Frank Lynch, whispers the numbers like a priest reciting a funeral prayer. Contact at 4,000 yards, Captain. Estimated speed 22 knots. Course 270. The destroyers are hunting. They know there's an American submarine in these waters. What they don't know is that this specific submarine, this piece of metal christened Harder, has a captain who has just mentally torn up all the United States Navy training manuals. Dealey pulls away from the periscope and his words fall into the control room like stones in still water. All ahead full. Course directly at targets. The silence that follows is so dense you could cut it with a combat knife. The executive officer, Sam Logan, freezes with his hand on the diving control wheel. His eyes meet Dealey's and there's an unspoken question hanging in the humid air between them, a question that every man in that control room is thinking but no one dares verbalize. Have you gone completely insane? The doctrine is clear. When destroyers detect you, you dive deep, cut the engines, stay in absolute silence and pray that the depth charges explode far enough away not to shatter your ribs. You don't accelerate toward them. You certainly don't face them like a bullfighter challenging a bull. But Dealey isn't following doctrine this morning. He's following something he learned in 5 previous patrols, something he saw in the eyes of Japanese captains through the periscope, something about human nature that no manual could ever teach. Captain, Logan finally finds his voice, and it comes out louder than he intended. Standard procedures recommend. I know what the procedures recommend, Sam. Dealey interrupts him, but there's no anger in his voice, only a cold, calculated certainty. And that's exactly why it will work. The Harder's electric motors begin to hum with growing intensity. The submarine is accelerating. Toward the destroyers. Toward death, 82 men think. Toward victory, 1 thinks. Understanding what Samuel Dealey discovered that June morning requires you to go back 4 days in time, to the port of Darwin, Australia, where the Harder was docked after its 5th war patrol. Dealey was 32 years old, had a lean build that made his uniform always seem a size too large, and eyes that had seen things that transform young naval officers into old men before their time. He grew up in Dallas, Texas, son of a railroad engineer who taught him that the most complex problems usually have surprisingly simple solutions. You just need the courage to see beyond the obvious. At the Naval Academy, Dealey wasn't the brightest student nor the most popular, but there was something about him that made instructors pause. An indefinable quality that separates those who execute orders from those who rewrite the rules when the rules no longer work. During the mission briefing in Darwin, the intelligence officer, Lieutenant Commander Philip Ross, spread aerial reconnaissance photographs on the table like playing cards. Tawi-Tawi, he said, tapping his finger on a small island in the Philippines. The Japanese are concentrating warships here. Battleships, cruisers, carriers. It's an invasion fleet waiting to happen. Dealey studied the photos in silence. You could see his mind working, processing angles and possibilities. Destroyers? He asked. Constant patrols, Ross confirmed. At least a dozen running protection circles 24 hours a day. They're paranoid about submarines since they lost 3 cargo ships last week. Good, Dealey said, and there was a ghost of a smile on his lips that didn't reach his eyes. Paranoia makes people make mistakes. No one in the room understood what he meant. Not yet. Over the next 3 days, as the Harder sailed north toward Tawi-Tawi, Dealey conducted combat simulations. But these weren't standard simulations. He was testing something. Sonar, he would shout during the exercises. Destroyer detected at 5,000 yards, approaching fast. What do we do? Dive to 400 feet, Captain. The operator would respond by reflex. Wrong, Dealey would say. Next scenario. Destroyer at 3,000 yards, depth charges in the water. What do we do? Total silence, shut down all non-essential systems. Wrong again. The crew began to think their captain was having some kind of nervous breakdown. But then, on the night before they reached Tawi-Tawi, Dealey gathered the officers in the tiny wardroom and explained. When you flee from a predator, he said, using a pencil to draw diagrams on a napkin, you confirm to him that you are prey. The entire dynamic of the encounter is established in that moment. He is the hunter. You are the hunted. Your survival depends on being faster, quieter, luckier. He paused, letting the words sink in. But what if you don't flee? What if you attack? The weapons officer, Frank Springer, shook his head. With all due respect, Captain, a submarine against a destroyer is like a knife against a machine gun. They have speed, maneuverability, depth charges. They have fear, Dealey interrupted him. And fear is a more powerful weapon than depth charges. He leaned forward, and now you could see the intensity in his eyes, that quality his Naval Academy instructors had noticed years ago. Think about it. You're a Japanese destroyer captain. You've been trained to hunt submarines. All your instincts, all your training, everything says that submarines flee when detected. Suddenly, instead of fleeing, a submarine accelerates directly at you. What does that do to your head? The silence in the wardroom was absolute. It makes you hesitate, Dealey continued. For just 1 second, maybe 2, you hesitate because your brain is trying to process something that doesn't fit the pattern. And in that second of hesitation, you're not turning, you're not accelerating, you're not taking evasive measures. You're just stopped. And that's when I kill you. Now, back to June 6, 1944, 4:52 in the morning, and the Harder is at 2,500 yards from the destroyers. You can feel the tension in the control room like a physical entity, pressing against your skin. The torpedo man, John Miller, has his hands on the firing controls and you can see the knuckles white from the force. Dealey is at the periscope again, making small course adjustments. Range 2,000 yards, Lynch reports from sonar. They're accelerating, Captain. They've detected us. Perfect, Dealey murmurs, and there's something almost serene in his voice now, like a conductor in the moment before the orchestra begins to play. Maintain course. Full speed. Somewhere above them, on the bridge of the lead destroyer Hyanami, Commander Tamichi Hara is having exactly the existential crisis Dealey predicted. Hara is a 20-year veteran of the Imperial Japanese Navy. He fought at Midway, in the Solomons, in the Coral Sea. He sunk 2 American submarines in his career. He knows how submarines behave. They dive. They flee. They hide. This one isn't doing any of those things. Target speed. Hara shouts to his sonar officer. Increasing. Commander. He's coming toward us. There's incredulity in the officer's voice. Hara grabs his binoculars and sweeps the sea. Dawn is beginning to tinge the sky pink and orange in the east, but the waters around are still dark enough to hide deadly secrets below the surface. He can see the periscope wake, a thin white line cutting through the waves like an accusing finger, coming directly at him. His training screams one thing. His instincts scream another. For exactly 2.5 seconds, Hara hesitates. Back on the Harder, Dealey sees through the periscope what he was expecting. The lead destroyer isn't turning. Tubes 1 through 4, prepare to fire, he orders, his voice calm as glass. Range 1,500 yards. Torpedo solutions ready, Miller confirms. Bow angle 0 degrees. It's a straight shot, Captain. Fire 1. The submarine shudders slightly as the first Mark 14 torpedo is expelled from the tube, its electric motor whirring to life as it accelerates through the water at 46 knots. Fire 2. Another shudder. Fire 3. Fire 4. 4 torpedoes now cutting through the Sulu Sea, each carrying 300 pounds of torpex, each programmed to run at 10 feet depth, each seeking the thin hull of the high enemy. Dealey keeps his eye glued to the periscope. He can see the exact moment when Harder finally comes out of his hesitation and begins to turn the destroyer. But it's too late. You can always tell when it's too late because there's a different quality to the ship's movement. It's not the smooth curve of a planned maneuver, but the desperate swing of someone who suddenly realized the predator has become the prey. Time to impact, 45 seconds, someone is counting. Dealey lowers the periscope. There's no need to watch now. The outcome is mathematical, inevitable. All hands, prepare for depth charges, he orders. Dive to 300 feet immediately after confirmed impact. The seconds stretch. Every man in the submarine is counting in his head, even those who weren't trained to do so. It's a human reflex. When death is near, you count heartbeats, breaths, moments that might be your last. Then comes the sound. First one, then 3 seconds later, 2 more. Dull, heavy explosions that make the entire hull of the Harder resonate like a giant bell. Impacts confirmed, Lynch shouts from sonar. Multiple secondary explosions. She's breaking in half, Captain. A roar erupts in the control room. 83 men forgetting for a moment that there are still 2 destroyers up there and probably very angry. But Dealey isn't celebrating. Silence, he barks. Dive now. Full left rudder. New course 180. The Harder falls into the depths like a stone. Above, you can hear through the hull, the horrifying sound of metal tearing as the high enemy breaks in two, the roar of compartments flooding, and then, after what seems like an eternity but is probably just 30 seconds, the first depth charges begin to explode. The next 3 hours are a hell of sound and fury. The 2 remaining destroyers are determined to avenge their sister ship, and they have enough depth charges to do the job. Each explosion is like being hit with a giant hammer. Light bulbs burst. Gauges crack. A water pipe ruptures in the aft torpedo compartment and has to be isolated. You can see young men, some only 19, 20 years old, squeezing their eyes shut and moving their lips in silent prayers as the hull groans and protests around them. Dealey is sitting in the captain's chair, with a cup of cold coffee in one hand and a stopwatch in the other. He's timing the intervals between explosions, calculating patterns, trying to understand the psychology of the captains up there. They're angry, he says quietly to Logan, who's beside him, but they're not being systematic. They're throwing charges randomly, hoping to get lucky. Should we be grateful for that? Logan asks, wiping sweat from his forehead. Yes, Dealey says. Angry men make mistakes. Calm men kill you. He waits until the pattern of explosions creates a gap, a 90-second window where the destroyers must be reloading their depth charge launchers, and then orders, rise to periscope depth. Quick and quiet. It's a bold move. The safe move would be to stay at the bottom and hope the destroyers give up and go away. But Dealey isn't interested in safe. He's interested in winning. When the periscope breaks the surface, he spins it quickly, memorizing positions, courses, speeds. The 2 destroyers are about 3,000 yards away, running an uncoordinated search pattern. Perfect. Torpedo solution on nearest target, he orders. Captain, Springer protests, we only have 8 torpedoes left, and they only have 2 destroyers, Dealey interrupts him. I like those odds. What happens next is a masterclass in psychological warfare. Dealey doesn't fire. He waits. Waits until one of the destroyers turns in such a way that its midship torpedo tubes are exposed, a momentary vulnerability in its armor. Then, fire 5. Fire 6. 2 torpedoes. Not 4 this time. Dealey is conserving ammunition because he knows this battle won't end today. The war against Japan will last another full year, though no one in this room knows that yet, and every torpedo counts. Both hit. The second destroyer, Minazuki, slows violently, black smoke pouring from its engine compartments. It's not sinking, not yet, but it's crippled. Dead in the water. Helpless. The third destroyer, Harder, now faces an impossible choice. Continue hunting the submarine or rescue survivors from the Minazuki, which is already listing 20 degrees to port. Dealey sees through the periscope when the captain of the Harder makes his decision. The destroyer turns toward its wounded sister ship. He chose compassion over revenge, Dealey says, lowering the periscope. That makes him human. And today, that makes me more deadly. The Harder escapes to the south, leaving behind 2 destroyers, one sunk, one crippled, and a lesson that will begin to spread through the Pacific submarine force like wildfire in dry grass. That night, Dealey sends a coded radio message to Pearl Harbor, sank 1 Fubuki-class destroyer. Damaged another. Frontal attack tactics successful. Recommend wider implementation. The communications officer who receives the message at Pearl Harbor reads it 3 times, certain there must be some encoding error. Submarines don't attack destroyers head-on. It's suicide. Everyone knows that. But Commander Richard O'Kane, who is at Pearl Harbor between patrols on the USS Tang, reads the report with a thoughtful expression. Dealey has discovered something, he says to his executive officer. He's discovered that fear goes both ways. O'Kane will begin using the same tactic on his next patrol. And then Dick Lanning on the Lagarto. And then Gene Flucky on the Barb. The technique will spread unofficially, from captain to captain, in quiet conversations at officers' clubs and in coded radio messages. Years later, when naval historians analyze Pacific submarine combat records, they'll notice an interesting statistical shift beginning in June 1944, a sudden drop in submarine losses during encounters with destroyers, and a corresponding increase in destroyers sunk. The change is subtle enough that it takes decades for academics to notice, but it's significant. Hundreds of American lives saved. Dozens of submarines that returned home instead of being buried at the bottom of the Pacific. All because a captain from Dallas had the courage to ask the question no one else was asking. What if the way we've always done things isn't the only way? But for Dealey and the crew of the Harder, the Battle of June 6th is just the beginning. June 7th dawns clear and warm. The kind of Pacific morning that would make you think of paradise if you didn't know that every square mile of these waters is contested by men determined to kill each other. The Harder is submerged at 90 feet, making a slow speed of 3 knots as it moves back toward Tawi-Tawi. Dealey is in his cabin, an 8 by 8 foot space that serves as bedroom, office, and sanctuary, studying navigation charts when there's a knock at the door. Enter, he says without looking up. It's Logan, and he's carrying a cup of freshly brewed coffee, a real luxury on a submarine where fresh water is rationed and coffee is even more precious. Thought you could use this, Captain, Logan says, placing the cup on the desk. Dealey finally looks up. Am I about to get a lecture, Sam? Logan hesitates. Not a lecture, sir. It's a concern. Let me guess. Dealey leans back in his chair. The crew is nervous. They think we got lucky yesterday. They're worried I'm going to do it again. With all due respect, Captain, wasn't it just luck? There's a long silence. You can hear the omnipresent sounds of the submarine, the hum of electric motors, the constant tinkle of instruments, the muffled conversations of men in adjacent compartments. Dealey picks up the coffee cup and takes a sip before responding. Do you know the difference between courage and stupidity, Sam? Courage is when it works, Logan says with a half smile. Stupidity is when it doesn't. No. Dealey shakes his head. Courage is when you've calculated the odds, understood the risks, and decided the potential gain is worth the danger. Stupidity is when you act without thinking about the consequences. He leans forward, and there's that intensity again in his eyes. Yesterday morning, I had several advantages. 1. I caught them by surprise. 2. I had a perfect torpedo solution because they were coming straight at me. 3. I knew that they would hesitate because their training hadn't prepared them for a submarine that attacks instead of fleeing. That wasn't luck. It was strategy. And today, Logan asks, if we encounter more destroyers? Today they know there's a submarine in these waters. They know they lost the high enemy. They'll be more cautious. Dealey smiles, and there's something wolfish in that smile. Which means I'll have to be more creative. Logan doesn't look reassured, but he nods and leaves the cabin. Dealey returns to his charts. He's looking for patterns, probable patrol routes, choke points where destroyers have to pass, places where a submarine can wait in ambush. What he's really doing is hunting. 3 hours later, at 11:23 in the morning, sonar picks up multiple contacts coming from the north. 5 surface contacts, Lynch reports. Convoy formation. Estimated speed 16 knots. Dealey is in the control room in seconds. Configuration. Looks like 3 cargo ships with 2 destroyer escorts, Lynch says, listening carefully to the hydrophones. The destroyers are flanking the convoy, 1 on each side. It's the classic setup. The Japanese learned the hard way that cargo ships alone are easy prey, so now they never sail without escorts. The destroyers stay on the flanks like German shepherds protecting sheep. The standard approach for a submarine commander would be to wait for an opening, a moment when the destroyers are far enough away for you to attack the cargo ships and dive before the escorts can respond. It's safe, it's tested, and it results in a decent success rate with minimal risk. Dealey doesn't do that. To periscope depth, he orders. Prepare to position between the escort destroyers. There's a moment of stunned silence in the control room. Captain, Springer finally says, you mean position to attack between the destroyers? No, Dealey says calmly. I mean position between the destroyers. We're going to be right in the middle of them. Now you can see it on the men's faces. It's the same expression you see when someone suggests jumping off a cliff without a parachute. If I hit one of the cargo ships in the middle of the convoy, Dealey explains, tracing the scenario with his hands, the destroyers will have to either run straight through their own ships to get to me, or go around. Either way, that buys us time to reload tubes and attack again. It's madness. It's also brilliant. The next 40 minutes are a lesson in precision. Dealey maneuvers the Harder into a position directly between the port escort destroyer and the first cargo ship. It's like dancing between raindrops, a 30-foot difference in positioning, and they'll be detected before they're ready. But Dealey has an almost supernatural sense of space and distance. He can feel where the submarine is in relation to everything around it, as if the Harder were an extension of his own body. Torpedo solutions ready, Miller finally announces. Target is the second cargo ship in line. 7,000 tons. Probably loaded with supplies for the fleet at Tawi-Tawi. Fire 7, Dealey orders. Fire 8. 2 torpedoes launched seconds apart. After that, it's chaos. The first torpedo misses, an engine problem that will make the torpedo run 3 feet deeper than programmed, a known flaw of the Mark 14s that will cost American lives throughout the war. But the second torpedo is true. It hits the cargo ship well below the waterline, detonating in cargo compartments filled with artillery ammunition. The ship literally disintegrates. You can hear the explosion even through the Harder's hull, an apocalyptic roar followed by smaller secondary explosions as ammunition compartments cook off. Dive to 200 feet, Dealey orders calmly. All ahead full. The destroyers react exactly as he predicted. One tries to go around the outside of the convoy, the other hesitates, unsure whether to dive through the remaining ships or follow its partner. In that hesitation, the Harder escapes. But Dealey isn't finished. Instead of running, he makes a circle in deep water and comes back under the convoy 20 minutes later. It's a move no Japanese captain would expect because it's crazy tactics. You just attacked this convoy, they're looking for you, every sonar ear is listening to every inch of water, and you're coming back. Periscope depth, Dealey orders. When the periscope rises, he sees exactly what he expected, the convoy in complete disintegration. The two remaining cargo ships have broken formation and are running in different directions. The destroyers are making frantic circles, looking for a submarine they assume is miles away by now. Torpedo solution on starboard destroyer, Dealey says. This is the boldest move of all. He's not targeting an unprotected cargo ship. He's targeting one of the hunters. Range 3,000 yards. Bow angle 40 degrees. Captain, that's not an ideal firing solution, Springer begins. It doesn't need to be ideal, Dealey interrupts him. It just needs to work. Fire 9. Fire 10. 2 torpedoes in the water. Dealey keeps the periscope up, watching. You can see the torpedo tracks, white lines running through the deep blue. The destroyer doesn't see. It's looking the wrong way. When the first torpedo hits the midship section, the destroyer, later identified as the Ikazuchi, turns violently to port. It's an instinctive move by the helmsman, trying to turn away from the impact. But it's exactly the wrong move because the second torpedo was aimed at where the ship would be after the turn. 2 hits. The Ikazuchi begins to sink by the stern. 2 confirmed kills, Dealey announces, lowering the periscope. 1 cargo ship and 1 destroyer. Not bad for an afternoon's work. The crew is in silent shock. They've been taught that encounters with destroyers should be avoided whenever possible. Their captain just sank his second in 2 days. Set course southwest, Dealey says. Let's get out of this area before half the Japanese Navy comes down on our heads. But the Japanese Navy is already coming down on their heads. What Dealey doesn't know, what he can't know, is that his attacks are creating shockwaves well beyond the physical explosions of the torpedoes. In Tawi-Tawi, in the operations room aboard the super battleship Yamato, Admiral Somu Toyota is standing before a large map of the region, his face a mask of contained rage. 3 reports are spread on the table before him. Hyanami sunk. Minazuki crippled. Ikazuchi sunk. 3 destroyers in 2 days. All casualties attributed to the same American submarine. This is unacceptable, Toyota says, his voice quiet but filled with fury. 1 submarine, 1, is making our entire fleet look incompetent. Captain Atsushi Oi, Toyota's staff officer for anti-submarine warfare, clears his throat nervously. Admiral, the survivor reports are consistent. This submarine isn't following standard American tactics. It's attacking head-on. It's positioning itself between convoy ships. It's making fools of us, Toyota interrupts him. He turns to face Oi, and there's an intensity in his eyes that makes the captain involuntarily step back. I want this submarine found and destroyed. I don't care how many destroyers you have to use. I don't care how much fuel you have to burn. Find it. But finding the Harder is proving more difficult than anyone expected. Dealey isn't just attacking aggressively, he's attacking unpredictably. After the sinking of the Ikazuchi on June 7th, he sails southwest for 6 hours, then turns abruptly northeast, then northwest. There's no pattern. There's no predictability. It's like trying to catch smoke with your hands. June 8th, 6:15 in the morning. The Harder is patrolling off the east coast of Borneo when sonar detects another convoy. 4 surface contacts, Lynch reports. Configuration looks like 2 cargo ships with 2 destroyers. Dealey is in the control room before Lynch finishes the sentence. He's operating on less than 3 hours of sleep in the last 48 hours, but you wouldn't see it looking at him. There's an energy in him now, an almost electric vibration. This is a man doing exactly the job he was born to do. Range. 7,000 yards and closing. They're on course 290, estimated speed 14 knots. Dealey closes his eyes for a moment, visualizing the scenario. You can almost see the calculations happening behind his eyelids, speeds, angles, distances, time to intercept. When he opens his eyes, he's already made his decision. We'll let them pass, he says. Springer looks at him in surprise. Captain, look at the formation, Dealey explains. The destroyers are too close to the cargo ships. If I attack now, I'll have maybe 30 seconds before we're under depth charge attack. But if I let them pass and then follow from behind. He smiles. Then I can attack from astern, and when they turn to hunt me, I'll already be diving and getting away. It's a hunter's patience. The willingness to let prey pass, knowing there will be a better moment. The convoy passes at 2,000 yards from the Harder. So close you can hear their engines through the hull. The men in the control room are barely breathing, as if the very sound of breathing could betray their position. Dealey counts to 300 after the last ship passes. Then, rise to periscope depth. Course 310. All ahead full. The Harder accelerates after the convoy like a shark following the scent of blood. 15 minutes later, Dealey has a perfect torpedo solution on the stern of the last cargo ship. Fire 11. Fire 12. Both torpedoes hit. The cargo ship, a 9,000-ton vessel loaded with rubber and oil from Indonesian plantations, begins to burn almost immediately. The rubber burns with thick black smoke that rises hundreds of feet into the air, a column of darkness visible for miles. The destroyers turn and accelerate toward the Harder's last known position. But the Harder isn't there anymore. Dealey dove to 300 feet and is now running silently to the southeast at just 2 knots, almost invisible to sonar. The depth charges begin to fall 20 minutes later, but they're all falling at least 500 yards away. The destroyer captains are guessing, throwing handfuls of death into the water and hoping to hit something. They're frustrated, Dealey comments, listening to the distant explosions. Listen to the pattern. There's no methodology. They're just angry now. Logan shakes his head in admiration. Can you really tell their emotional state from the depth charge pattern? Of course, Dealey says as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Calm men attack in grid patterns. They're systematic. Angry men attack in bursts. Listen, 5 charges in rapid succession, then a pause, then 3 more. That's anger, not strategy. It's an insight that says everything about the way Dealey sees war. For him, it's not just about technology and tactics. It's about psychology. It's about understanding that inside every warship, inside every aircraft, inside every tank, there's a human being with fears and hopes and breaking points. And if you can understand those human beings, if you can predict how they'll react under pressure, then you have a weapon more powerful than any torpedo. The depth charges finally cease after 40 minutes. The destroyers give up and return to escort the remaining cargo ship. Dealey waits a full hour before rising again to periscope depth. When he finally raises the periscope, the sea is empty except for the column of smoke still rising on the horizon from the burning cargo ship. 3 ships in 3 days, Logan says softly. The press is going to love you when we get back home. Dealey lowers the periscope and looks at his executive officer with a strange expression. We're not doing this for the press, Sam. We're doing this because somewhere in the Pacific there's an American submarine with a crew of 80 men who are going to encounter destroyers tomorrow, or next week, or next month. And if we can prove there's a better way to fight, a way that keeps them alive while still accomplishing the mission, then every risk we take here is worth it. It's a moment of rare vulnerability from a man who normally keeps his emotions guarded under layers of professional competence. Besides, Dealey adds with a sudden smile, I still have 4 torpedoes left and 1 more day before we need to start sailing back to Darwin. It would be a shame to waste them. That night, as the Harder sails north once more, Dealey sits in his cabin writing reports. Not the official reports he'll send to command, those will come later. These are personal reports, notes to himself about what he's learning. Discovery number 1, he writes in his orderly handwriting. Destroyers are more vulnerable psychologically than physically. Their training conditions them to expect submarines to flee. When you don't flee, you create confusion. Confusion leads to hesitation. Hesitation creates opportunities. He pauses, chewing the tip of his pen. Discovery number 2. Ship captains under attack make decisions based on emotion as much as logic. Anger makes them attack recklessly. Fear makes them attack conservatively. The trick is to control which emotion they feel at any given moment. Another pause. Discovery number 3. The Navy teaches us to treat submarines as silent hunters. But there's power in being the obvious predator. There's power in making the enemy know you're there and simply not caring because you're too deadly for him to do anything about it. He's articulating, in real time, a philosophy of war that will influence submarine tactics for decades to come. But he doesn't know that yet. He thinks he's just writing notes to himself. June 9th dawns with cloudy skies and rough seas, perfect conditions for submarine operations because they make visual detection difficult. The Harder is patrolling off Cebu Passage when the impossible happens. Multiple surface contacts, Lynch announces. Counting, sir, I'm counting at least 6, possibly 8 ships. Dealey is in the control room instantly. Configuration. Looks like a complete task force, Captain. I have sonar signatures consistent with destroyers, possibly cruisers. They're in combat formation, high speed, course 135. Dealey's heart accelerates. A task force. Not a convoy. Actual warships. This is the kind of target submarine commanders dream about. It's also the kind of target that can kill you if you make a single mistake. To periscope depth, he orders. Let's see what we have. What they have, when the periscope breaks the surface, is terrifying and magnificent at the same time. 6 destroyers in screen formation, with what appears to be 2 heavy cruisers in the center. It's more firepower than the Harder could hope to face and survive. Sir, Springer says nervously, our last 4 torpedoes against this force. We're not going to attack the entire force, Dealey interrupts him. We're going to attack the lead destroyer. There's a moment of stunned silence. The lead destroyer, Logan repeats slowly, of the group of 6 destroyers. Think about it, Dealey says, and you can see his mind working through the problem in real time. If I sink the leader, the entire formation has to adjust. They'll slow down, reorganize, possibly break the screen to rescue survivors. In that confusion, I dive deep and get out. What if it doesn't work? Springer asks. Then, Dealey says with a cold smile, we'll have approximately 3 minutes to make our peace with God before we're blown to pieces. He says it so casually that it takes a moment for the men in the control room to realize he's not joking. This is the moment, you realize, when the line between courage and madness becomes so thin it's almost invisible. Dealey is about to attack 6 destroyers with 4 torpedoes. The odds are mathematically absurd. But he's already proven that odds don't matter as much as psychology, and he's betting he can play the minds of Japanese captains one more time. Torpedo solution on lead destroyer, he orders. I'm going to need a perfect setup for this. Frank, you're going to get 1 shot. Just 1. It has to count. Miller, the torpedo man, swallows hard but nods. His hands are steady on the controls. The Harder maneuvers into position. It's an excruciatingly slow process because they have to do it silently while the task force thunders toward them at 20 knots. A single active sonar ping and the party's over. But the destroyers aren't using active sonar. Why? Because they don't expect submarines in this area. Why would they? What submarine would be crazy enough to operate so close to Tawi-Tawi, where half the Imperial Navy is gathered? Solution ready, Miller finally announces. Range 1,800 yards. Bow angle 5 degrees. It's clean, Captain. Dealey takes a deep breath. This is the moment. Fire 13. Fire 14. 2 torpedoes in the water. Just 2, because he's saving the last 2 for emergencies. Through the periscope, Dealey watches the torpedo tracks run true. The lead destroyer, later identified as Tawi-Tawi, doesn't see until it's too late. Both torpedoes hit in rapid succession, one below the bridge, one in the engine room. The Tawi-Tawi literally breaks in half. It's the kind of lucky strike that happens maybe once in 1,000 times. 2 perfect hits in exactly the right places. The destroyer is sinking in 90 seconds. Dive, Dealey shouts. 400 feet. Now. The Harder falls into the depths while behind them, you can imagine the chaos unfolding. 5 destroyers suddenly without a leader, a formation that just had its command center ripped away, captains shouting contradictory orders, sonar operators trying to locate a submarine that's already disappearing into the depths. The depth charges begin to fall 3 minutes later. These aren't the furious, uncoordinated attacks from previous days. These are systematic, methodical, deadly. The Japanese have learned. They're angry, yes, but they're also being professional now. They're running a search grid, Dealey comments, listening to the pattern of explosions. Starting where they saw the torpedo tracks and expanding outward. Smart. Is that good? Logan asks. For us, I mean. It means they'll take longer to cover the area, Dealey says. So yes, it's good. Gives us more time to get away. But getting away isn't as simple as it sounds. The Harder is making only 2 knots, any faster and they'll be detected by sonar. At 300 feet depth, in the cold dark of the Sulu Sea, they crawl away as explosions blossom around them like deadly flowers. One depth charge explodes close enough to knock out all the lights. In the sudden darkness, you can hear men breathing heavily, trying not to panic. Emergency lights flicker on after 15 seconds, tinting everything red. Damage check, Dealey orders calmly. Small leak in aft torpedo compartment, someone reports. Under control. Cracked seal on ballast tank number 3, but holding. Depth gauge cracked, but still functional. They've been hit, but not mortally. The Harder is tough, built at Portsmouth shipyards with steel designed to take exactly this kind of punishment. The explosions continue for another 2 hours. Then, gradually, they become more distant. The Japanese are expanding their search, assuming the submarine must have escaped the immediate area. They're right. At 2 p.m., the explosions stop completely. Dealey waits a full additional hour before rising to periscope depth. When the periscope finally breaks the surface, the sea is empty. The task force is gone, probably to Tawi-Tawi to regroup and mourn their losses. 4 destroyers sunk in 4 days, Logan says with awe in his voice. And 3 cargo ships. 5 destroyers, Dealey corrects him. You're forgetting the Minazuki we crippled on the first day. Intelligence reports later confirmed it also sank. 5, Logan repeats. My God. Dealey lowers the periscope and for the first time in 4 days, you can see exhaustion on his face. He's only a man, after all, and even the greatest men have limits. Set course for Darwin, he orders. It's time to go home. The voyage back to Darwin takes 6 days, and on each of those days, the story of what the USS Harder accomplished spreads through the Pacific submarine force. Coded radio messages bounce from submarine to submarine, from base to base. Commanders who had been practicing conservative evasion tactics for years are suddenly asking questions. What if? What if fear goes both ways? What if you can turn the tables? At Pearl Harbor, Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of Pacific submarine forces, reads Dealey's patrol report 3 times. Then he calls a meeting of his senior staff officers. Gentlemen, he says, tossing the report on the table, either Samuel Dealey is the luckiest submarine commander in naval history, or he's discovered something fundamental about anti-destroyer warfare that all of us have missed. With all due respect, Admiral, one of the staff officers says, luck is the more likely factor. Frontal attack tactics against destroyers violate every principle. 5 destroyers, Lockwood interrupts him. In 4 days. 3 cargo ships. 0 casualties to his crew. If that's luck, then I want every commander in this fleet having the same luck. He picks up the report again, turning to a specific section where Dealey described his logic. He's saying that destroyers are vulnerable to psychological attacks. That their strength, speed and maneuverability becomes a weakness when confronted with something that doesn't behave as it should. It's counterintuitive, which is probably why it works. Lockwood makes a decision in that moment that will save hundreds of American lives in the months to come. I want Dealey's tactic codified, he says. Not as official doctrine. Not yet. not until we have more data, but as a tactical option that commanders should know about. And I want Dealey to come here personally after his rest leave to give briefings. But Samuel Dealey will never give those briefings. There's a cruel irony in the universe sometimes, a way luck turns exactly when you think you've mastered it. On August 24, 1944, less than 3 months after his remarkable victory near Tawi-Tawi, the USS Harder will be lost with all hands during its 6th war patrol. The exact circumstances will never be fully known. Japanese records are incomplete and contradictory, but the most likely explanation is that the Harder was caught in shallow water near Bataan by a combination of destroyers and aircraft. Even the best tactics can't overcome bad odds and worse luck. 83 men lost. Samuel David Dealey, 32 years old, will never see his 33rd birthday. He will be posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. His wife will receive it at a ceremony where everyone wears brave smiles and no one mentions that the war still has a full year left to go. But here's the thing about legacies, they don't die when people die. The tactics Dealey pioneered in those 4 days in June continue. Richard O'Kane uses them in the Tang and sinks 19 ships before being captured. Eugene Fluckey uses them in the Barb and survives the war to write a book about his experiences. Dick Lanning, George Street, Lawson Ramage. Commander after commander learns that there's power in confronting your fears head-on, literally. By 1945, what began as one captain's renegade discovery has become unofficial doctrine throughout the Pacific submarine forces. Young commanders on their first patrol are being quietly told by older officers, if you find yourself pursued by destroyers, consider attacking instead of fleeing. Trust us. It works. The numbers tell the story. In 1943, before Dealey's innovations, American submarines in the Pacific had a casualty rate of approximately 15% during encounters with destroyers. By 1945, that rate dropped to 7%. It might not seem like a huge difference until you realize it represents literally hundreds of lives saved. Hundreds of fathers, brothers, sons, husbands who came home instead of being buried at the bottom of the Pacific. And the influence doesn't end with World War II. Cold War-era submarine training manuals include sections on aggressive attack tactics against surface ships. Modern nuclear submarines practice scenarios where they confront destroyers instead of avoiding them. The principle Dealey discovered, that unexpected behavior creates tactical advantage because it breaks the enemy's OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, is now standard military theory taught at academies around the world. There's a United States Navy submarine now named USS Samuel Dealey. It's a Virginia-class submarine, representing the cutting edge of submarine technology. Its crew knows the story of the Harder. They know about the 4 days in June 1944. And when they go out on patrol in contested waters, knowing that somewhere out there are surface ships that can kill them if they make a mistake, they remember that sometimes the safest move is the move that looks most dangerous. Decades after those 4 days, naval historians still debate exactly what Samuel Dealey discovered. Some say it was just good luck. Others say it was tactical genius. Some argue it was simply the courage of one man willing to risk everything. But perhaps what Dealey really discovered was something more fundamental than tactics or courage. Perhaps what he discovered was that the rules, all the rules, are created by people who make assumptions about how the world works. And when you can identify those assumptions and break people's expectations, you create opportunities that shouldn't exist. The Japanese destroyer captains assumed submarines would always flee. That assumption was rooted in years of experience and training. It was reasonable. It was logical. And it was exactly the wrong thing to assume when facing Samuel Dealey. In June 1944, in waters off Tawi-Tawi, a submarine captain from Dallas decided that conventional wisdom was wrong. He decided to attack when he should have fled. He decided that courage wasn't in avoiding danger, but in running directly into it in a way that transformed danger into opportunity. And for 4 days, he was absolutely right. 5 destroyers sunk. 3 cargo ships destroyed. An entire Japanese fleet shaken and demoralized. And, most importantly, a lesson learned that would save countless lives in the months and years that followed. That's the true measure of a legacy, not how long you live, but how many people continue to benefit from what you discovered after you're gone? Samuel David Dealey lived 32 years, 4 months, and 12 days. But the tactics he pioneered are still being taught 80 years later. Still saving lives. Still proving that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from people willing to question everything everyone assumes to be true. Somewhere right now, at this very moment, there's a young submarine commander facing an impossible decision. Enemy destroyers approaching. Doctrine says to flee. Every instinct says to dive deep and hide. And then he remembers a story he heard during training. A story about 4 days in June 1944. A story about a captain who turned fear upside down. And he makes a decision that shouldn't work, but does. Because Samuel Dealey proved, 80 years ago, that it works. That's the power of a true legacy. It's not about being remembered. It's about fundamentally changing the way future generations think about what's possible. It's about having the courage to be wrong in a way that turns out to be more right than anyone dreamed. And it's about understanding that the line between courage and madness isn't where we think it is, it's where we decide to draw it. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and comment where you're watching us from. I want to know how far our content is reaching. And also subscribe to our channel so you have access to incredible stories for free. Big hug and see you in the next video.